Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to House General and Housing. It's Thursday, the 13th of March, and we are now going to continue committee discussion of H 57. Since I was not at the testimony, I've heard summaries of the testimony, but I am not going to participate as chair. I'm going to let Ashley, who was acting as chair, continue to act as chair in this portion of the discussion and get to a vote. And I am going to take printed copies of the housing bill, unnamed housing bill, I have to sign one and take it to the court, I guess, and then I have to take one to that drafting office. So I'll do that now.
I'm in Tony's office, so you can just grab them on.
Okay. Thank you. I'll be back.
All right.
Wonderful. So, yeah, I think just as a reminder for those who are tuning in, or just as a reminder of what we discussed before lunch today, where we kind of have some decisions that we have to make regarding 57 and how we want to move forward. So right now, the bill is in appropriations, and they have chosen not to move it forward, asking us, and they're not returning it to us. So we either make recommendations or we can hope that they decide to take it up and then we can amend it. So I think we need to talk about how we would like this to move forward and what we think will actually happen. So earlier today, we heard testimony from the treasurers, Vermont Police Association, and then the SEA.
Do you have any sense of why they're not sending it back?
The corrections part of it?
So
What corrections is part of it?
No, she was asking if that was the reason.
I don't know. I'm really not sure. And I don't know.
That's for
I've heard of that before. Are you guys looking for the bill?
Yeah, actually, the link that says H 57 is taking me to 161.
That could be, oh.
What?
It was,
Yeah,
so
one of the
yesterday's handout, it was part of yesterday's documents. H 57, but when I click on H 57, I'm getting H 461.
If you go to bills,
Coming up correctly that way, but
Yeah.
that's as introduced?
no, so they're
Is
in,
it
if you go into bills,
On our committee page.
Page.
Yeah.
Right, I don't see H 57.
Post the update.
and it,
It's not in our committee.
Oh, right, that's, okay.
right, so to answer your question, Rose, I don't know. And I'm not sure process wise if we can request it back. But I think that if we don't make recommendations for change, I don't think they're gonna take
In
it
a
up.
different committee.
And that's my opinion.
So
If we do make recommendations for change, how do we know they're gonna take it up?
We don't,
that's not,
Oops, what did you say, Elizabeth?
see what you're up to.
I said, if we do make recommendations for changes, how do we know they're gonna take it up?
How do we know what to change?
Or is it that?
Yeah.
okay, here, okay. Have you found the bills yet? Would you like help?
We're extremely close.
It's gonna be on the committee page in like 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll review a few things. So we heard from the Office of the Treasurer. And they made the recommendations about the definitions expansion and not including that in our work. Obviously, that's up to the committee, but that was a recommendation from them.
The other was clarifying. What's that? No,
So
the classifications of claim, like,
child, spouse.
no, the other one, which was
Life insurance, workers' comp, what they actually.
workers
have.
like, oh,
Yeah,
That they do.
yeah.
Which everyone gets workers' comp.
And under the same.
But the criteria of what's considered God, I'm blanking right now. Like for firefighters, they have a set,
Allocation.
no, a set
This?
classification of like illnesses. Presumption of
Right.
that's the job.
Yeah.
And they would like,
Brain
if
cancer,
if there's others, they'd like to
Right.
use,
Right,
is it workers' comp or is it
yes,
others?
it's in workers' comp.
yeah.
Define what.
So something like PTSD, those classifications.
Yes.
And they have criteria for determining whether it is work related or not, which is the question, one of their questions here.
I think that existed for firefighters, but it doesn't exist for the others, and I think that's why we were, that's, that's why
Yes.
we're including this.
And they're saying that that
Workers' comp
language is in the
doesn't-
workers' comp.
For everyone or just for firefighters?
It's in for law enforcement.
Okay.
It is, it should be in corrections if you, workman's comp. They have a category for everything.
So I personally, have great respect for the treasurer's office and the work that they do. And, they're the ones who are doing the administrating and have had the experience being, Gavin's been on the board, other things, so I'm comfortable with their recommendations in that regard. And like I said, I have great respect for the work they do over the years and, it's not forever, like that piece, like if we have to revisit it in another time, but their recommendation was that we kind of do this now for implementation, moving forward. So I personally support that piece, to support their office and the testimony they gave.
I just think that it will delay. And having worked on this bill for so long and be personally involved in this bill, I feel we should just go with it and whichever, whatever committee, Senate, whatever they want to do to change it, let them change it, is how I feel. The longer we wait and the more people we have come in and talk about it, it's not a bill that we want to use. It's not a benefit that we want to use, but it is important. It is important for law enforcement, correctional officers. I mean, you work for the state. There are a number of departments that are dangerous. DCF, those social workers. I mean, we have to start somewhere. And I would be very disappointed if we just didn't go with the bill. Let it go. Let them make, if they choose to take it up or not take it up, which I will. So I really am, like I said, I'm very sensitive about this bill because we have worked so hard on it. And it passed unanimously and almost unanimously on the House floor. And, you ask 10 people for their opinion, you're going to get 10 different opinions. Let's just go with it, let it go, let them come up with whatever they want to come up with. But if we can't pass this bill this year, I don't know what the legislature is capable of. I'm extremely, extremely hopeful that we get this bill through.
Thanks. I just have, I have a lot of curiosity around the language of how does one quantify? I feel like, yes, originally, we went through all of the work and all the testimony to get to where we are because traditional family structures no longer exist. They do, but not always. And, and on page 5, in subsection 3, it says the board shall be responsible for determining whether to award monetary benefits under section 3173 for this chapter. So that is literally in their description. I don't think that changing this language, if there was something else that they wanted to change, then I could understand that. But given today's social climate and given today's what we look at in our society, in our world, to say, well, we may open it up to people who we didn't intend to. I'm willing to take that risk as it is, as opposed to limiting people not being able to access something that they would need and that would benefit their family in a time of crisis. I feel like if there was gonna be change, I feel like it would be like given the example they gave, we worked about a lot around that previously. So I feel like if we were gonna have more conversation around that, great. If we're gonna change anything, great. Like if it was like, oh, let's change the amount of time the partner lived with them or whatever. Sure, I'm for, but to determine who gets to. How do you define family in today's society? I feel like that has changed. I feel like this reflects that. And I think as it is good in that aspect. And I feel like the board can then decide whether they want to approve it or not, because that is the purpose of the board. That is what it says their role is.
I would suggest not necessarily for right now, but if it goes to the Senate, comes back to the Senate, that they call it this list of priorities be effective in the absence of what we call the legal device where you assign a beneficiary for your life insurance policy. But that would allow the employee to clarify it long before it might, hopefully ever be effective. So that because the board just wants more, they don't want to be the ones in that, what probate winds up doing. He's listening to people, argue with each other over an estate. They don't want to be there. But if I don't know who would retain that document or where it would be filed. I don't know enough about that, but that would give the board the ability to not have to fret about all of that. It would be just very clear. So if this is probably not the time to try to figure out all the language and who's going to administer that. But going forward, that might at least minimize what they're trying to, the minefield they're trying not to step in.
I'm confused because while I get all of the deputy treasurer's remarks and I have them all written down and whatnot, I don't think that's what Approps was actually asking for recommendations about. So let's set that aside for now and talk about what exactly Approps wants us to send recommendations on.
I can answer that. Appropriations wanted us to hear more testimony on what is already offered. So we heard that from Chris Hoare and Steve on what these individuals who are in these industries already receive. We have done that. I don't know if the testimony today was enough, like, I think that's a decision that we have to make as a committee of, are we saying, yes, we have satisfied your request for us to hear more testimony? Or we've at least, or I think many of us have heard there's a concern about Department of Corrections in there. We had that testimony, or we heard that testimony today. So then I think we need to decide, do we say, no, the bill as we voted for it is good, and let appropriations do what they will, and that could mean they might not move this bill? Or do we try and make a recommendation of changes to the bill in hopes that they're willing to take it up? And I don't have that answer. I don't know what will 100% satisfy. I can tell you what I have heard from individuals. But again, somebody said earlier, you ask 10 different people's opinions, they're going to give you different opinions. But I know as of now, if the bill stays as is, it probably will stay on their wall, just like it did last year.
It didn't, just to clarify, it did not stay on their wall last year.
100%.
So we ended up.
We passed it to the Senate.
Yes, I understand. But at first, it did not move through appropriations. It moved in a different way, is what I was saying.
Initially, I was told that it was a mistake, appropriations, that they didn't even know they had the bill.
So do we want to say, let's leave the bill as is? What would you all like? I know I want nothing more than to move this bill and see it go into the Senate. If that means we have to make changes now and allow the Senate to do work on it, that's part of the process. And then knowing that if we don't agree with it, it's a committee of conference. I personally would much rather see movement than see it die on their wall.
Can you, one of you, either you or Mark, explain what happened in appropriations? Is this just one person blocking the taking up the bill, or did the committee vote not to take up the bill, or what? Is it one person making a request for us to take more testimony, or is it the whole committee, or what? Can you give us a sense of that?
My understanding is that the committee wanted us to hear more testimony on.
All of the committee did?
That is my understanding.
I mean, I think, one person or more than one person may be behind it. And I really don't know, was the bill assigned to Jim? Is he the person who deals with this subject matter? Because there's subject, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but I do know that their choice was either to bump it back to us, or I think the speaker's office arranged that it would stay where it is and that we would provide draft language to them. Because the advantage of that is they can act next week, whereas we would have had to act this week. So anyway, but I don't really know about the internal dynamic.
So question, so if the request was they wanted us to hear more testimony, I would feel like we satisfied that and I think if considering it's appropriations is my train of thought in my brain processing information. I think they were concerned about, logical would be the double dipping, right? Which is why they wanted us to hear more testimony about what exists, which is what we did. And we learned about the workman's comp and how people are already, and this would fill in that gap. This is not additional funds on top of the workman's comp. It's to add the people who are not included in the federal standard, correct? So I think we honored the request to hear more testimony. I think we did what was requested of us. If the draft language, it is curious to me that appropriations is asking for the language change to be the definitions of who can apply that is where the confusion is for me.
That was
was for the
actually
treasurer.
treasurer's
Okay,
office.
so then, based off of our appropriations request, I feel like we have met their needs unless they were looking for specific language around something pertaining to appropriations. So I feel like that is what it is. The treasurer's request to have the language changed, I feel like that requires, or not, because they didn't even ask for change, they asked for removal. And so I think that would require more conversation, because if we're removing it, then what would it be instead? And I feel like that is going to be a completely different conversation. If we're removing 4 sections of definitions, then what? So if not this, then what? That's a much larger conversation, and in my opinion. And so I feel like we honored the appropriations aspect of it. In my brain, just thinking appropriations, the bill and what is requested, because they didn't ask, I don't feel like the ask was for draft language on a specific thing, other than if there is a specific thing they want us to give draft language on, then I feel like, okay, let us do that, but I'm not hearing that other than.
Breaks because they're so short-handed. Come on, really?
I don't think the
But-
treasurer's office asked us to remove that piece.
No.
No.
They just asked about the other, they're two
Yeah,
separate
yeah, I
things.
didn't hear a request for that.
Okay, well, then appropriations is suggesting we remove that piece. Have they heard from correctional officers?
And I don't think that was,
No.
was that a request from appropriations?
No, but none of our witnesses here.
It's what we're hearing.
That's what we heard.
That's what.
That was not for, oh, okay, oh, so that was the request.
It's like.
That is the request,
Room-
that,
Yes, and
okay,
exactly,
okay.
and exactly
Okay.
what Representative Carlson is saying. It's about service. It's about the sacrifices that they have made that the members of the legislature don't know about. I don't even think the governor knows about it,
I think.
and he should. I know his commissioner knows about it, but doesn't do anything about it. Believe me, I know personally from these correctional officers what they have to endure. Sleeping in cars, exactly what is being done, because they are exhausted. Missing family events because they have to work overtime. Being shorthanded in Springfield and having to draw people from other locations and from probation and parole. I mean, this just is.
I think, and there really are 2 sets of things that have to happen. I'm comfortable with corrections being in the mix because I've heard that from law enforcement people, and they do acknowledge what you're talking about. But I don't think it is in the long run. I'm comfortable with them being in the bill. It's encouraging for them to know that there will be a benefit if they get killed on the job. It's, I think, more important that we manage to get through to the commissioner that something has to be done so they don't die on the job. Because this will be an encouragement to them, but it won't solve the problem. But in the same sense of, and I don't know the community of corrections officers or how tight-knit they are, or like what I do know are emergency services, police and firefighters. And they face the uncertainty and hazards as a team every day, and they become an amazingly tight-knit group. And when somebody goes down, they all grieve, and the recognition on the part of the state that this person died in the line of service affects the entire community. Whole fire department be affected. The whole police department. I don't know the community of corrections well enough to know that same dynamic. But the risk is certainly still there. I think that we need to recognize that but at the same time, we need to address the corrections department. And that committee may be the only way to get the commissioner's attention.
You know, I agree, the commissioner should
So it's-
step in, and I'm certain that he has been, but nothing is being done, except, like I said, you call in from another facility, or you call in probation and parole to come in and do correctional officer's job that they know nothing about.
So he may need to have a conversation with a room full of legislators that know what he knows. Which is, you know, I'm sure he's been made aware of these things. Can't talk to motives or decision-making or other circumstances, but the committee that handles corrections should probably have taken the testimony from the people you've heard from. That committee should have heard it. So that may be a logical next. step.
Right. I think they've tried to make corrections aware. They haven't, I don't believe they've taken testimony directly from correctional officers. I do know that the governor has this week. There were 3 correctional officers that met with the governor, finally.
Okay,
So hopefully, maybe he can speak to the commissioner, and hopefully, you know, they'll work on improvements, but,
so I still talking about before.
I think Rep Dodge has a comment or
I just
question.
had a, yeah, so I'm just trying to get clarity. So are we gonna vote on this tomorrow? Do we have a chance to have somebody from the top of the table to check in with approps and just to clarify for us exactly? I would like something in writing that we can all read so that we are transparent about why we're considering what we should be considering. Because if our goal is to get it passed, we want to address the right thing. I don't think that we should be working in the dark, like we're just going around in circles.
Totally agree.
Well, yeah, we
We took testimony, but we don't even know if we took the testimony on the things we need to learn about, I feel like. That's my frustration right now.
I was confused about
I
that.
tend to be very patient,
Yeah,
but I'm
that's what you
hitting
think of.
I'm hitting my,
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
hitting my limit. And I think that we have asked a lot of important questions. I think that we can't conclude anything other than these jobs are really brutal. They serve a purpose in society. It's really unfortunate. They happen to disproportionately affect, Black and brown people probably the worst. This is a reality in Vermont as it is everywhere else. And so if we just can try to improve the lot of some folks who meet the very worst end of tragedy and help, in my mind, my goal in this legislature is to help the people who have the most need with what they need most. If the folks who are in those jobs have asked for some kind of honorific recognition that our state can afford to honor them with, then I need to understand why approach has an issue with that, with the approach that we've put forward before I can understand,
Just really quickly, I think Rep just went downstairs to try and get that confirmation. Just like to have.
Yeah, but I would appreciate having it, like, I fully trust, but I feel like we're at the point where this, like, I get it, that conversations have to happen, but,
But it could be more focused if we know who we're
yeah.
focusing on.
That's the,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
The other thing, as a tangential question, since we're, just to take some of the pressure off the question. I think it might be a good idea to, is it 461? Is 461 the other one? To have those definitions mirror each other as to the degree that we can. Because they both change the family structure and definitions of family, and we should be making that consistent wherever we possibly can.
Well, I mean, it's about labor, right? It's about trying to make sure that it's.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to redefine everything for every bill that we do. Just saying.
Were you gonna say something? Oh, I just, and then the other little thing is. I mean, see, you have full trust, I do not.
Trust in what?
Well, I don't know, you said I have full trust in, you know, what moves for, or what, I don't know what you were referring to when you said that.
Either.
Okay, but all I'm gonna say is, so here's my thing, I'm like,
I
why
have full trust in you, Sadia.
Oh, don't do that. No, I'm like, I wanna know what do you want us to do draft language on? Like, be clear on that. Like, what is the request? So we can know what the heck we're talking about. And then two, my thing is, I'm gonna need some kind of confirmation that if we do this request and we do this extra work, that they're actually gonna take it up, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, if we send it as is, they could choose to leave it on the wall. We do this extra work, they can still choose to leave it on the wall.
And we're burning through all of our time. Time we have before the end of tomorrow. I mean, they're asking us to burn through what? I'm not okay with that.
I just, yeah,
They want us to take out correctional officers is what they want us to do.
Well, tell them, we can tell them we took testimony to that effect. Whatever our decision is.
I don't wanna take corrections out.
No, I don't.
I mean, we can watch what's going on in New York. I mean, the
Right.
guards are on strike
Yeah.
because of the working conditions. I mean, it has nothing to do with,
And
You know-
she had to call the National Guard up and the correctional officers lost their jobs.
yeah. And I mean, they're illegally striking, but they're doing it because they're in fear of their life. You know, they go to work and they get beat up and there's no what's happening is there's no consequence for the inmates. So they know that, you know, they can basically do whatever they want. And it puts the correction officer in harm's way. And, you know, and that's probably why they're short-staffed. I mean, at least in Dannemora, because that's where my husband had his dealership across the street from the prison. But it was, you know, they would come and say, it's not good. It's not good. They have to change. And in Vermont, at least in my town, they want people locked up more. We just have repeat offenders that are just, you know, let out and walk the streets again. And then reoffend sometimes 3 times in one day.
Yeah.
And it's like, we have to support our correction officers.
So, like I said, Chair Mahali went downstairs. I will work with him to get the information that you've all requested. I don't think we were looking for a decision to be made this afternoon, just to start the conversation from the testimony that we heard earlier. Unless anybody has anything else, I think